Can you both share with me what external forces you feel are changing the nature of reporting today? John, we'll start with you.
A tremendous number of forces are changing what we do. The old days we talked about a 24-hour news cycle, then we talked about a 24-second news cycle, and it's a 24-character news cycle with social media. So the conversation with our audiences, with the public, and with people we talk to for stories is continuous. The old days of deadlines for stories are kind of rolling and continuous. I don't think it fundamentally changes the point of what we do or the idea of what a good news story is and the way we do the work, but we will continually, and I think you guys probably do the same, we'll write a story, we'll update a story, someone will get back to us, we'll have a little more information, we'll update the story again. So I think in terms of the work we do with folks around the state, we may tell you that our deadline is 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but we will continue to update and improve the story for the online audience, which is really the number one audience for every news organization now. We'll continue to move that story forward through the day and the night as it merits.
And I think, I don't know, maybe it might be helpful, I wanted to explain a little bit about sort of what the day-to-day is like, and I think a lot of our worlds across the Capitol, across the press corps. So like right now, for example, we are in budget season, so we are analyzing and, looking through all these very detailed budget policy proposals. And meanwhile, we've also got several deadlines underway. So right now we've got a week before the bill introduction deadline. So we're constantly monitoring and looking for bills and trying to understand those. We've also got, of course, it's election season, so there's an election coming up here in March, and everyone's sort of looking to November. So I think it's just helpful to understand when we're talking about the forces that are shaping our reporting, the breadth of stuff that we're following and tracking and looking to break news on and looking to explain in a better way to people. And I think we're always triaging. Like, for example, this morning, looking into a complicated foreign policy, health policy proposal, and then meanwhile, looking at reading 8 bills, and that was all before, 10 a.m. So we're constantly triaging and trying to decide what's the most important thing and getting things out as quickly as possible, and as accurately as possible. And every news organization, I think, also worthy of pointing out is different in terms of the decisions we're making about what we cover, but ultimately really is in the public interest and trying to do, accountability reporting and what's going on with the legislature and state government and with the governor.
Great, thank you. We're going to just also encourage everyone to send your questions in using the chat feature on the GoToWebinar. Next question, how important is the local angle to you on statewide issues when it comes, and when does that statewide issue come into play?
Send it to me.
It's lots of that.
I mean, it's important. I don't want to minimize the importance. Certainly, the Times serves Los Angeles and Southern California first. I think they're concentric circles of who we serve. We serve Southern California and Los Angeles. We serve California as a whole. We serve the country and everyone from there. So certainly, if we've got a policy or a program that particularly impacts our first home community, it's either going to impact them more notably or it's going to impact them in a way that's different than everyone else. We will take that into consideration. But my goal usually in the work we do is I'm looking for stories that tell a larger truth. They tell a larger truth about what it means to be a Californian, about the particular conversation that Californians need to have about their government and the public policy issues that shape them. So I would not turn a story away that might have an immediate impact in the Central Valley or Northern California if I thought it told that larger truth. But certainly if there's something that's impacting Los Angeles or Southern California first, I'm probably going to make sure that I understand that for our readers before I take it beyond that.
I like that. I think, so at Politico, we have sort of different subject areas that we cover. So we cover the legislature and we cover the governor, and we cover political and policy development, but we also have really developed expertise in different areas like energy and healthcare and the environment and education. And so I think we focus on what the state is doing, and as the Capitol Press Corps, you would expect that, but there's always really interesting and nuanced stories to tell. And so I think we really definitely care about the local angle or local voices. So just one quick example that's timely, the governor is doing, he's looking at state-owned land for homeless shelters, and we saw a Caltrans video of him trucking little tiny houses up and down the freeway a few weeks ago, and it's interesting just thinking about that. I mean, Sonoma County, the county that I used to cover, was doing that 5 years ago. So that is an example, I think, of an area where the state is trying and testing this new approach to addressing homelessness, but there might be lessons learned or voices that might add to our stories from other local places. Same thing with, I'm thinking about some of the water problems in the Central Valley. And as the state tries to address, clean drinking water and tries to look at, holistically some of the environmental harms that with the drinking water, there could be local lessons learned from places. So I think, we definitely want to hear what is going on in counties. And as with any kind of coverage, we will never promise, and I don't think there would ever be an expectation that we, include everybody in our coverage that we've talked to, but it does all go in. I think that's an important point that maybe some, if you're not living in this world day in, day out, might not be that apparent, but that stuff does go into our reporting and go into our stories in one way or the other. And at least for me, most of the time, I don't necessarily have an angle or a framing or like a top to my story when I'm coming in. It really depends on what the reporting indicates, and so that's where I think the local perspective could be really helpful, even with state coverage.
So what's the best way for the county PIOs who are watching this today and watching the recording, a couple weeks down the line, what's the best way for county PIOs to deliver information to you? How do you like to get news or pitches or even background information?
You should just email me. My email box is at 0. So I will read it. No, you should.
Your email box is at 0, really?
Actually, it's at 4. It's
Oh
at
my
4
God.
when I left my office.
I'm not going to admit mine then. Go ahead.
No, you should. It would be really helpful to get more input and thoughts, even if it's not a formal pitch. I think there can be a lot of pressure pitching, and quite frankly, I rarely ever do a story that's a formal pitch. I can't remember last time I did that, actually. But for example, with the power shutoffs that were happening and still might be happening now because of the lack of rain that we're getting, when that was really blowing up, I think it would have been really helpful to hear, Lake County doesn't get a lot of attention up there, but I want to know what's going on in Lake County. I want to know how people are being affected in Santa Barbara, for example. And again, it's really to tell a broader statewide story about how communities are responding to these crises, not only shutoffs and wildfires, but behavioral health. The governor, and I think we'll hear a lot more from this during the State of the State address next week, is making behavioral health a huge priority. Counties are, I don't have to tell you guys, counties are front and center in that paradigm. And, I think hearing from counties on these big, hefty, meaty policy proposals that the governor is rolling out is going to be really critical to really understanding not only how the governor's decisions are affecting local governments, but whether there's going to be pushback on the governor and whether his ideas are actually going to be able to come to fruition. So that's just a couple of examples.
Only thing I would add to it is kind of like the 101 of a lot of what folks who interact with us do, which is know your media, know the news organization you're talking to, understand what they cover, why they cover it, how they cover it as best as you can. folks at Politico are different from the Times, or different from a local television station, or local from a lot of different sites. So, try to learn a little bit about the news organization. If you're looking at connecting with folks who cover state government from Sacramento, as we do, know the calendar and the rhythm of state government enough to know when you can provide us information that works with that. Know that the governor puts out a budget by January 10th, and that we're going to be looking at impact on governors, on his proposals in local communities across the state. Know when budgets are signed, know when bills are introduced, because a lot of the rhythm of what we do is driven by those things. If there are big policy proposals that come out, we want to see how they're going to impact communities. That's an opportune time for you to tell us how they're going to impact those communities, which makes our life easier. And I don't think there's any human that wants their life not be easier. So you can contact us that way. But I do think, again, being mindful of that, we're not going to cover local stories the way local reporters do them. We're not looking for the back and forth of that local issue. We're trying to find, back to that phrase that I use a lot, that larger truth of it. And I think the more you can tailor your approach to that, the better. And in terms of how to do it, you can email. I have substantially more emails in my inbox than Angela does. She must be like the queen of email administration. No, I'm just horrible at it. Email is one way, but I probably get 500 emails every 2 days. So email is a little bit tough. You can social media, you can follow us on social media, and you can kind of do the @ thing, which is the Twitter thing, right? Where you kind of flag somebody that way. There is no perfect way to do it, but I do think the more you know about the news organization and the reporters you want to cover, and I just wanted to say that for a moment. If you're interested in state healthcare policy, you'll want to talk to Angela compared to someone who would cover transportation policy or criminal justice. Same thing with my team of reporters at the Times. You can see who writes on homelessness issues, who writes on transportation, who writes on environment and wildfire. These are going to be different people. And it doesn't help to send something blanket en masse. You're going to get less of an interaction if you don't find who those people are. And most news organizations are pretty good at showing you what those people will cover. So
I think it's a really good point too about the calendar. If, for example, if we get bombarded, or if we get a request on a crazy day, it's a PROPS deadline or something like that, I think it's just going to go, over the top of our heads. But on the flip side, if there's something that I think is being overlooked, or it's buried in some kind of whatever detailed, policy or political development that isn't getting enough attention, I think that's another way of, trying to reach out. I think would be a good way.
Great. So our next question is, given the 24-hour news cycle, do you personally place more of an emphasis on accuracy or speed?
It's a trick question, right?
No, it's not a trick question for me at all. Accuracy. I will lose the speed race every time to be accurate.
You can't be first, but I don't think anybody would.
I will lose that race every time. I mean, you're 100% right. We want both. We want both because that's the world we live in. I will trade speed every single time. It may be to my downfall sometimes, but I don't think it is. Accuracy, though, I want to be careful. Though I want to distinguish. So I think you're right in some ways that it's a little more complicated than that. Accuracy is different than the whole story. As I said before, let's take the budget. We'll put the first story up 25 minutes after the governor concludes his presentation of the state budget, and we will add to that story in subsequent updates to the story throughout the afternoon before final deadline, before it goes to print and onward. That's not an accuracy issue to me. That's how much do you know that I know verifiable that I can put online early. But if it's the accuracy of, if I know this is verifiable, I'm going to pick accuracy every time.
Exactly. You would never forego that, and we do often, and we should say what we don't know. If there's an important question, like how the governor is going to pay for some big thing, or if there's a glaring hole, just thinking about if there's an essential question that anybody, a member of the public or county employee or even reporter would want to know, you just say it's unclear, and you endeavor to answer those questions in either follow-up stories. We don't generally update stories. We do another story, another like quick thing. But yeah, you build on what you know, and then and you're clear about what you don't know. I think that is the best approach.
Great, thank you. And I didn't mean that to be a trick
No,
question.
I'm tongue in cheek.
So information now is available in so many different forms, with Twitter being one that is a primary source. How can PIOs best work with reporters via Twitter and other social networks? And are there any new networks that you're starting to see?
I don't have a perfect answer for this. Do you?
Mhm.
Okay.
Next question. No, go ahead.
No, I mean, can I just be honest? Like the social media landscape is so difficult to navigate in terms of sourcing and weeding out information that isn't quite relevant. And I don't have it perfected. I think we try to use it as a tool. I try to use it like a tool, like any other reporting tool. It is essential. I've got TweetDeck open. I'm monitoring it from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed most days, and so it's important. That being said, me personally, I'm monitoring like 13 lists constantly, as well as my news feed, and so sometimes things can get lost. So so I don't think it's this magic bullet that I think when I was in journalism school, was coming up right as the news landscape was really drastically changing and social media was becoming more and more critical, and it is critical. I don't want to discount that, but I'm not sure it's I don't think it has I don't think it's everything. It's not going to replace like online news organizations. The tweet is helpful and it's useful at getting stuff out and reaching people, but ultimately I think it can, for me, be a little bit of a distraction, or stuff can get lost. I don't know.
Well, and the other thing I was going to say, I agree. I think the other thing though to keep in mind is what's the immediacy need of what you're trying to convey to a reporter. If you're in the moment, if you're like, let's take a wildfire. If you're dealing with a wildfire issue in your community, your county, and you're trying to get to people who cover state government, which of course we're not your first layer. Your first layer is your local news and people who can communicate with your residents about the information they need to have. But if you're in an immediate kind of situation, the adding them on Twitter, the hashtag that's trending, that all works. If you've got time, if this is a thing you want us to know about and like what your community's doing and how it weaves into a larger conversation, social media is probably not your best avenue in that way. You can DM me, you can personal message me on Twitter or something like that, but you can email me. It's the same way with that, and I will go through the emails. I've now realized I've said all this, that I've got too many emails, but I'll look at them. So I think you want to pick the medium of communicating with press based on the timeliness of the information. And I think it's going to get lost on social media if you're basically telling me about something that is a topic that is important over the next several months. Like that day's flow of Twitter or Facebook would get lost on that. If it's a fire in your community, that's the place where
That's a very good point.
You're hitting that.
That's a very good point. Yeah, emergencies, floods, life or death situations, public health crises, definitely a critical role.
And we're monitoring it in real time at that point because we need to know what's going on.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, news is broken on Twitter all the time. I mean, we get scoops from Twitter all the time. I don't want to discount that, but I will never rely on it because I am so flooded on it. I am so paranoid about missing something.
All right, so thinking about the whole scope of tools that PIOs use with journalists, is the press kit dead?
I hate to have you define the press kit. Not that I've gotten a lot, like the pieces of paper in a folder. Yeah, I don't want it.
I want it.
Okay, Angela wants it. I want an electronic version of it, actually, is what I would want. I mean, honestly, I'm one of those guys, I'm going to be interrupted, but like, I'll have folders on my computer by policy area, by subject matter. So like if I was covering welfare issues in a local county, or if I was covering, changes to CalWorks, that would be more appropriate, right? I'd have a CalWorks folder, and I might have a subfolder of yada, 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 and I would want the digital version of that I could go back and I could refer to. I don't want the paper, just me personally, because I don't really know what to do with it. I don't keep stacks of it. I try not to be that old guy reporter with all the stacks of mail everywhere.
Does that mean I am that person?
No, you're not. You're not. If you've got it all organized because your inbox is down to 4. But I think, like, I would just like you to think about what is it you want me to get out of that packet. I guess that's it. If it's like, this is my county and it has 72,000 people and we have fruits and nuts and birds. Like, that's not a press kit that's going to, again, that's knowing your audience of who the media outlet is, I suppose.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and if there's me personally, I just like to read paper if I can, but if there is important information that you're going to be giving to the media, we aren't. I think it's pretty safe to say, like, reporters aren't just showing up blindly I'm not showing up blindly at press conferences. I have an expectation of what I could potentially get out of that in terms of news coverage. I have an expectation for what I'm going into, and I will want to know everything that's in that press kit before even coming in. So just send it to me, help me do the background and the research, and if there's something like a report, like a media report that with some interesting data or a study or something like that, I think there could be, that could be useful as like an addendum, like additional information. But I think that with so many different, with the rapidly changing, media landscape, every outlet, every reporter, as you can see, is going to have different preferred approaches. But I do, as much as possible between the press kit and press conferences, just, helping reporters get as much, information beforehand as possible is going to allow us to do our jobs better. It's going to give us more time to do more thoughtful reporting and writing, and I think that would just benefit, the point of the press conference or the press kit in the first place.
Let's talk a little bit more about press conferences. What makes your ideal press conference? Do you find them beneficial? How can PIOs set those events up to really help out reporters?
I think it's one of those nuanced situations, but if there's a, police, fire, emergency, there's always, I think, an appetite for a press conference. We always want to hear if there's an official that we don't normally get access to or someone with key information, we want to hear directly from them. I think there's definitely a role there. As an exercise in public relations, I don't want to say they're not helpful. Often it's good to hear from a broader range of people who are working on a specific issue or cause, and that's always really helpful. It rarely makes it in. We have such tight limits on space and time that unless it really adds, I don't think it's going to be, make it into the final product, but it's not helpful.
My comment is probably based a little bit more on different hats that I've worn in journalism compared to like the one I'm wearing now, and they're just like the basics of a few things in the press conferences. Certainly, communication staff 101, give me a piece of paper in advance with everybody's name and spelling on it before they start talking. Please don't make me try to get all of that in the middle of the event, which is disruptive and kind of keeps me from listening to what they're saying. Second of all, please tell the people you're working for not to have more than like 3 people up there. I really can't have 9 people who repeat the same point over and over. That's a capital thing, probably as much more than it is in communities. But like, you have to manage the people who you are trying to help get their message out, and not all of them are going to get up and speak at an event. The reporters are going to tune it out, especially if it becomes duplicative at a certain point. I just also want to say thank you very much about this program, and then you repeat the exact same thing the person did before. So that's kind of exhausting. We're on really super tight deadlines. We don't really have a lot of that time. And then I would always advocate to give me something in writing. Here I just gave this really horrible thing, don't give me a piece of paper. Not true. Give me something in writing before the event that I have 5 minutes to digest it, and then give me more time for Q&A and less time for prepared statements. and let me have a Q&A. Give me 5 to 10 minutes or before I got to the event with what you want to roll out. And then let me come ask questions about that. And it'll be a better dialogue and the reporters will leave more happy than giving me a prepared speech. Because the prepared speech, I still have to ask the questions, which takes longer, and time is time in the world
Yeah, hell
these
yeah,
days.
at that point, yes, Q&A, because then it's gonna, I think ultimately it's gonna save you more time, because you're not gonna be fielding questions from reporters asking for, number, detailed questions. Definitely. If there's a Q&A, absolutely.
And I know that's hard, because I know the tendency is to want to come out and make a statement and comments. I'm not saying you don't do that, but keep them short. So.
Great, thank you. We're going to encourage everyone to keep those questions rolling in. Our next one is from a media perspective. How is this administration different from past administrations? And are there any benefits or challenges from your perspective as a bureau chief or as a reporter?
I will say, so this is I'm the old man part of this. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 5th governor. I think the biggest challenge with this administration so far is they want to do everything.
Yeah.
They want to do everything, and they want to do everything immediately. It's a frenzy. Let's actually not call it that. It's an energy. I think frenzy starts to kind of be like it's not going to work. But there's an energy to that that's difficult to keep track of. I think for press, but also for the public, and I would argue for stakeholders and for lawmakers, elected officials on the local level and state level. It's a lot all at once. Governor's famous for saying, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, but I might advocate a little bit more walking than a little bit more chewing gum. So I think that part is unique to this administration. And then I think this administration, more than the others for obvious reasons, this is an administration that is much more interested in and spending time on other means of communication with the public beyond the traditional means. And that's, of course, because of the era in which they are governing, social media having its presence that it is. But that has become accelerated in this administration. I think the last administration, Governor Brown, was a little more sparse in how he would make his social media communication. This governor likes to roll it out nonstop in lots of ways.
And yeah, I think we saw that. I mean, we saw that he signed a NCAA bill with LeBron James last year before the Capitol Press Corps got a heads up, at least to my knowledge. And then even this, a couple days ago, he was on, my time is all thrown off. He was on Seth Meyers and The View. So, I mean, he definitely has a different style, but I've only been here in Sacramento since 2017, so I do not have the depth of knowledge that John has.
You're not right. I've done it too long, but this speed. I mean, you would agree. There's a frenetic nature to it.
Yeah, I mean, I made some notes that I haven't even looked at, but yeah, I do think this governor has faced a lot of criticism and about wanting to do so much all at once, big stuff, healthcare, education doesn't really get a lot of attention in terms of like statewide or national, but he's doing a lot of stuff on education. He's doing a lot of stuff on energy, environment. I mean, he's doing a lot of stuff. And I think he owns it. I think he embraces it. I think he and his administration has pushed back and saying, we just have a different style. We don't think that that's a bad thing. And I think if you look at what Newsom's history is when he was mayor, even when he was on the board, he's known for having this thick binder called the accountability matrix with all of his little policy detail areas, and he can recite it. He can pull out a page and there's a stat, and he had recited it 5 minutes ago. So I think there is I think he does embrace like wanting to do all of these things, and I do think he courts national attention more so than past governors. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah. At least the last one. The last one didn't really need it because he'd already done that. Schwarzenegger got it just because he was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. And then a lot of them have wanted some kind of national exposure, and I think Governor Newsom is similar to that, yeah.
Great. Angela, you talked a little bit of kind of like what your daily flow, what a regular day, well, no day is really regular.
Yeah.
Can each of you just share with us a little bit about, how you start your day, what do you read first, what do you go to, and your process throughout the day.
Yeah.
You can start.
I mean,
I yell at my kids at the beginning, or I tell them to get up and brush their teeth and go to school. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I have dogs.
Feed the
But
dogs.
no, I get up pretty early in the morning, and I usually read. I look at Twitter the first thing usually to see if there's anything I missed overnight, and then I read the national main dailies. I read the New York Times and Washington Post every morning. Then I read Politico, our homepage, and then I subscribe to a bunch of different newsletters. Read the LA Times in the morning, see if there's anything I missed there. And then I listen to KQED, and sometimes I listen to Cap Radio when there's a pledge drive. But I probably do like an hour of reading, just quick reading in the morning, and then I exercise and come to work. Usually I roll in. It really depends on what's going on, what's going on today. Is today Wednesday? Oh, there's a vaping hearing this afternoon. And so I did some background. The governor has his proposal on the vaping tax out. And there's an e-cigarette flavor ban legislation. So I put together some paragraphs on that, expecting that if something happens in this vaping hearing later this afternoon, I would be able to write something if news surfaces. So, just catching up on news in the morning, trying to get some personal time in. I really cannot stress that enough, which I'm sure everybody else, you guys know that too, the importance of balance, if there is balance. And then, depending on what's going on, it's either the budget or legislation or, and I think it is also, I should point this out, we are all very busy, but that shouldn't dictate whether or not you approach us. I just want to encourage, if there's big stories that, if there's trends that are happening, or if there's troubling things that you think are happening, we're constantly working on, at least I am, enterprise and investigative stuff, and I've got a list of 10 things that are on my burner, and right now I'm working on 3 more in-depth enterprise stories. So we're always looking for that kind of stuff, and I like what you say about telling the larger truth, about telling that bigger story of what's really going on, some of the deeper stuff that isn't getting, that sometimes can be missed in the day-to-day coverage.
I do a lot of the same things. I think you sample everything in the morning. I was going to say, I think it actually starts the day before. I try to do planning in the afternoon about what I expect to be happening the next day, and then I get up to see if it actually was going to be the same way I thought it was going to be. It's a sampling of local, state, national news. There are a variety of sources. There are newsletters. You read as much as you can read. I think reporters generally get up in the morning with a slight bit of panic. Is there anything out there that I didn't have?
That's so true.
Is there anything that someone's got? Damn it, Angela's got that. And why don't we have that? That's the nature of the business. Once your panic has subsided, you just kind of go through to see what has happened overnight and then what is expected for the day. You look at a variety of sources to look at what's on tap for the day ahead. But I don't think the morning process, can I just say quickly, the morning process is more what's happening now? Do I know what's happening now? Is there anything else I need to do? The process after that process, which is several cups of coffee and trying to think a little bit, is what's coming down the road. What's in 3 days, what's in 5 days, what's in next week, how do you keep that moving? And that's a function in my world now, particularly more as a bureau chief, of trying to figure out what's on the horizon for my team, what do we need to be covering. But certainly overnight, it's the same kind of thing everybody does. I will tell you, I think social media is one of the hardest places to do that, because the flow just depends on whatever the heck someone is talking about at that particular point. There is a very old school way of looking at state government and public policy coverage every morning, which is a guy I used to be his television producer, who runs a website called Rough and Tumble, rtumble.com. And he still puts an array of what mainstream media has covered that particular day and what is there, and that's a good place to look at it too in terms of California focus. So.
Yeah, that Rough and Tumble is great. And it's funny, I didn't even say that. I haven't looked at it in so long.
I'll tell Jack you said.
I don't know. He's great. And I think by the time that updates now, we've already read everything. So I think that's a reflection of how fast the news cycle moves. And not only nationally, but in California. I mean, when it's a busy time in the legislature, it is fire hose.
I was just going to say really super quickly, because I want to take other questions before we run out of time. I do think, one of the great joys is being able to set up like a Google News alert. You can set up a Google News alert about the governor. You can set it up about California budget. You can set it up whatever it is. And that will bring you through the day, in the morning, whenever it is, a sampling of what's out there. And it does your work for you in a lot of ways. The Google News alerts kind of save my bacon in lots of different places about things that I'm tracking that I don't have to go find. They're brought back to me. So.
Great. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to encourage those who are listening to send in their final burning questions. But before we do that, just wanted to ask you, who are your journalistic or personal heroes?
Oh, personal heroes.
I
I like that
personal
one.
or political. I'll let it be your choice.
Aw.
No, you're started. You go for it.
Well, my personal hero is my grandmother, because she's amazing. She ran her truck stop in rural Wisconsin, and in a lot of ways it tells the story of rural America. But I don't know, I don't like to talk about, I admire so much great reporting and so many great journalists. I think right now I'm really into Atul Gawande, who writes for the New Yorker. He's doing some really amazing healthcare stories. He's a doctor, and he does a really amazing job of pulling back the curtain on the industry and inequities in the system. So I'm loving that right now. And I just finished a Michael Pollan book on psychedelic mushrooms, which will be useful if that ballot initiative qualifies.
Which it won't. That's my thing.
And I just started a book by Elizabeth Rosenthal. She used to write for the New Yorker, a healthcare reporter. I'm really knee deep in this healthcare space right now. So she has done some really incredible work on shining light on exorbitant healthcare prices and how they can just they vary so greatly across the country.
A lot of family personal heroes as well. I have a grandmother I can relate who never took no for an answer, and I think kind of not taking no for an answer is kind of part of journalism. Hers was she ran a flower shop in rural eastern North Carolina, so she never was told that she could do something. She did it anyway. I don't know what's beyond that. I mean, I certainly know I got into journalism as a public service. I thought it was a public service. I think one of my early people that I was drawn to was Charles Kuralt. I was a broadcaster. I thought the stories he told, they had humanity to them. They had compassion to them, and they told really fascinating glimpses of life around America. I had a mentor journalist in journalism school. I also went to Cal Berkeley for the master's program, who got me into political reporting and government reporting. But I think ultimately, as I said a moment ago, I mean, journalism's a public service. I think all of you work in public service too. I think we're here to educate, inform, and enlighten people about the government that they have, and it's a privilege to do it. And I admire the work of a lot of people in this realm. I think a lot of the folks in California do a really good job of explaining a complex state. As both of us are immigrants to California, you Californians, you're some crazy people. And I think that telling those stories are hard, and I think there are a lot of really good places to find quality information about the stories and people of the state.
Fantastic. As we wrap up, I just want to open it up and give you both the opportunity to share anything that you haven't been asked, anything that you think is really important for our county PIOs to know about you, about your publications, about what we're all doing in this space.
Well, I just want to say, just emphasize a point I touched on earlier, that we really want to explain the history of some of these issues that are surfacing again right now and becoming so important. I mean, homelessness, housing, big deals. I just can't say this enough, and I'm not sure what the best way is, but if you think that there's something interesting that your communities, that your board of supervisors is doing, or that, or a problem that is happening that in your community that you think that, the governor should tackle more head on, Like, we want to know about that kind of stuff, and we want to know what counties think about what the governor is trying to do. We talked a little bit about how we think this administration is different. You probably know too how this administration is different. So, I think I do want to just encourage, this is part of our reporting, it's part of the importance, I think, of what's going on at the state level. So I just would encourage you to reach out to me.
I would agree with that, and I would just say briefly, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but just to kind of circle back to it, I would view news organizations that you deal with somewhat in concentric circles of people who will deal with really immediate community and regional issues to state and beyond. Really know those news organizations and know who those reporters are.
Yeah.
Do a lot of reading. Be a really good consumer of news content before you try to go figure out who you want to talk to in the work that you're doing, because I think otherwise you end up spending a lot of time kind of mismatched with the kind of news organizations and reporters that you're talking to. And then in terms of if you're looking for coverage that's going to be outside of your community, pick a handful of things, and pick a handful of things either that you think dovetail in with a statewide conversation or are unique enough to show your community, your region, your county in a way that is different than the rest of the state. Because we're really looking ultimately, from my perch at the Times, we're looking for one of two things. We're either looking for examples of this larger statewide conversation, or we're looking for something that is really so unique that the rest of the state will want to know about it. And I know you know that, we all know that, but if you can try to use that frame a little bit when you make communications with news organizations that are outside your most immediate sphere, your local newspapers, etc., I think you're going to be better off.
Well, great. Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Angela. I want to thank all of our participants in the live webinar and our viewers for the recording.